Welcome, friends, to another journey into the quiet stories of our past. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. This channel is your place to explore history slowly, softly, and peacefully. Tonight, we travel back thousands of years to the banks of the mighty Nile, where the desert's heat fades into cool, still nights. Imagine yourself there, under that vast, unchanging sky, as we uncover how something as simple as linen helped bring comfort and coolness to ancient Egyptians in a world without modern conveniences. So dim your lights, settle in, and let the soft rhythm of history carry you gently along. You settle beneath the vast, unchanging sky of ancient Egypt, where the Nile flows like a lifeline through the parched desert. The sun's relentless heat gives way each evening to a desert chill, and you, like many others, face the challenge of finding rest in a world without modern comforts. Sleep, though essential, is not always easy here. Without the technologies of air conditioning or even sturdy, insulated homes, people relied on resourcefulness born of necessity. Among the most common materials available was linen, a fabric derived from the flax plant, whose fibers had been woven by skilled hands for thousands of years. Linen, light and breathable, became central not only to clothing and ceremonial garb, but also to everyday solutions for comfort, especially in the heat of the desert night. Imagine the careful process by which flax was harvested and processed. Workers pulled the slender stalks from the earth along the fertile banks of the Nile. After drying, they subjected these fibers to retting, a soaking process that loosened the tough outer layers, allowing the inner threads to be separated. Once spun and woven, the linen fabric was light, cool to the touch, and able to wick away moisture inside modest homes of mud brick. Families often spread thin sheets of linen on their sleeping mats or beds. The porous nature of the fabric allowed the slight breeze, however faint, to pass through, providing relief from the sticky heat. Linen's natural qualities helped wick away sweat, a silent but vital service when the temperature dipped just enough to invite rest. But linen was not used only as a covering. In wealthier homes, finely woven linen curtains hung over doorways and windows, moving gently to catch the slightest wind. These curtains formed a primitive but effective cooling system, allowing air to circulate while keeping insects and dust at bay. You might imagine sitting quietly in the soft glow of oil lamps, watching the linen dance softly as the cool night air breezed through. For many Egyptians, this was part of the rhythm of daily life, the interplay between the harsh sun and the cooler nights, mediated by the touch of linen. It was both a practical tool and a subtle luxury, providing comfort in a landscape defined by extremes. You might wonder how this simple fabric influenced not only comfort, but also social customs. Linen was considered pure and sacred, often associated with the gods and the afterlife. The very sheets you lay upon could carry meaning beyond rest. They were symbols of cleanliness, protection, and even spiritual purity. Yet, questions remain. How did the quality and availability of linen differ between social classes? Did the poorest citizens have access to this fabric in ways that truly eased their nights? How did the use of linen for cooling evolve over time as Egypt moved from the Old Kingdom into later dynasties? These are threads waiting to be pulled, leading deeper into the daily lives of one of history's oldest civilizations. As evening deepens along the Nile, the landscape changes slowly from the blazing sun to a softer twilight. The Egyptians' relationship with linen was far more than just functional. It reflected the social fabric of their society, quite literally. To understand how linen eased the night's heat, you must first grasp how this fabric was woven into the very economy and culture of ancient Egypt. Linen production was labor-intensive and required a well-organized workforce. Farmers grew flax in carefully irrigated fields near the Nile's banks, relying on the river's annual flood cycle to nourish the crops. Flax was not just a crop, it was a critical commodity, tightly controlled by the state and temples. The finest linen was reserved for priests and royalty, its softness and purity a marker of status and power. Common people often made do with coarser linen or blends. Yet even this rough fabric was superior to other textiles in its cooling properties. Imagine a typical Egyptian household preparing for sleep. The family would lay mats woven from palm leaves or rushes, then spread linen sheets atop. These sheets, despite their simplicity, were prized possessions passed down through generations, kept clean through ritual washing and airing. The process of caring for linen was an art in itself. Without modern detergents, ancient Egyptians used natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture, to bleach and cleanse their fabrics. This preserved the linen's breathability and lightness, ensuring it remained effective at drawing moisture away from the skin. You can almost picture a mother in a courtyard, gently beating and rinsing sheets in water drawn from a nearby well, drying them under the bright Egyptian sun to prepare for another warm night. Beyond personal use, linen played a role in public and religious life connected to the night's coolness. Temples often had linen curtains that separated sacred spaces, fluttering in the desert breeze to maintain a calm, purified atmosphere. Some tomb paintings depict scenes of linen-covered beds and drapes, hinting at how the living sought comfort in materials believed to transcend the mortal realm. The relationship between linen and cooling extended into sleepwear as well. Ancient Egyptians typically wore lightweight linen garments to bed, designed to maximize airflow and minimize heat retention. You might imagine the soft rustling of these robes in the dim light, a soothing sound that marked the transition from day's labor to night's rest. Yet, while linen offered relief, nights in Egypt were never entirely free from discomfort. The desert air, though cooler, could be dry and biting, and insects posed persistent challenges. People employed other strategies alongside linen such as opening homes to catch gentle breezes or using herbal sachets to ward off pests. What remains intriguing is how these practical adaptations reveal a deep understanding of natural materials, an environment long before modern science. The ancient Egyptians' ability to harness linen's properties shows a blend of necessity, tradition, and a quiet appreciation for comfort in harsh conditions. As you reflect on this, consider the unanswered questions about everyday life. How did trade influence linen quality over centuries? Did climatic changes affect flax cultivation, and therefore the availability of linen for cooling? How might the introduction of new weaving techniques have changed the experience of nighttime comfort? These questions set the stage for the final part of our story, where the broader implications of linen use will come into focus. As the centuries passed along the banks of the Nile, the humble flax plant and its woven linen thread quietly witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties, the unfolding of rituals, and the steady rhythm of daily life. The story of linen as a cooling fabric in ancient Egypt reveals not only a practical solution to a persistent environmental challenge, but also a subtle testament to human ingenuity and adaptation by the New Kingdom period. Linen had evolved in texture and quality. Egyptian weavers developed finer threads and more intricate weaving patterns. producing textiles that were both delicate and durable. These innovations allowed linen to become an even more effective cooling material. The finely woven sheets and garments absorbed sweat without clinging to the skin, letting air circulate freely. This was not simply about comfort, it was a means of preserving health in a climate where overheating and dehydration were constant risks. Interestingly, the economic importance of linen was such that it was often used as currency and as offerings to the gods. Its value extended beyond the physical, it was imbued with symbolic meaning. The purity of linen was associated with Mat, the concept of order and balance that governed both the cosmos and society. Sleeping wrapped in clean linen was, therefore, a ritual act that connected the sleeper to the divine harmony of the universe. You might picture a high-ranking priest resting after a day of ceremonial duties, enveloped in smooth linen sheets that helped cool his body and calm his mind. This fabric was a bridge between the material and spiritual worlds, offering not only physical relief, but also a sense of sanctity and protection during the vulnerable hours of sleep. Yet, despite its many benefits, linen was not universally accessible. Common folk, particularly in rural areas, sometimes had to rely on other materials or simply the open night air for relief. This disparity highlights the layered social realities of ancient Egypt, where comfort and luxury were often reserved for the elite, while survival strategies varied widely among the population. Moreover, the legacy of linen's cooling properties extended beyond Egypt's borders. Trade routes carried Egyptian linen to neighboring cultures, influencing textile practices throughout the ancient world. The fabric's reputation for breathability and durability ensured its place in the broader story of human adaptation to climate. As you lay your head down, wrapped in this ancient tale, consider how the simple threads of flax and linen wove themselves into the fabric of civilization. What lessons might we take from such understated ingenuity today? How do the ways people coped with natural challenges millennia ago still resonate in our search for comfort and balance? These reflections invite you to drift gently into sleep, cradled by the cool whisper of linen across the centuries. You find yourself amid the rolling fields of ancient Rome, far from the grandeur of marble temples and the roar of the Colosseum. Here, in the countryside, life moves with a different rhythm, steady, unhurried, and shaped by the soil beneath your feet. The Roman farmer, often overlooked in history's grand tales of emperors and conquests, was the backbone of an empire that stretched across continents. Imagine waking early before dawn, the air still cool and thick with the scent of earth and dew. Your tools are simple: a wooden plough, a sickle, and baskets woven from reeds. The land you tend is not just a source of food, but a legacy passed down through generations. Its boundaries marked by stone walls or hedges. Farming in Rome was a careful balance between tradition and adaptation. Crops such as wheat, barley, olives, and grapes formed the staples of the diet, but their success depended heavily on understanding the local climate and soil conditions. Irrigation was rudimentary, yet effective. Small channels and wells helped to bring water to thirsty fields during the long, dry summers. Daily life for these farmers was a steady procession of tasks, from planting seeds to tending vines, harvesting grain, and storing the yield for the winter months. Their diet, though modest, was hearty. Bread baked in clay ovens, olives pressed into oil, and simple cheeses made from goat's milk. You might imagine the quiet satisfaction of breaking bread with family after a day's labor, sharing stories under the fading light. Yet beneath this calm exterior lay challenges that shaped every decision. Unpredictable weather, pests that could devastate crops, and the demands of local landowners or the state. Taxes and tithes often took a heavy toll, leaving farmers to navigate economic uncertainty as carefully as they did the seasons. Perhaps surprisingly, these farmers were not isolated. They were part of a complex network of trade and community. Local markets thrived with exchange of goods, gossip, and news from distant Rome. You might picture a bustling village scene where farmers barter grain for tools or salt, their conversations punctuated by laughter and the occasional disagreement. What remains less visible, however, are the rituals and beliefs tied to the land and its fertility. Festivals honoring Ceres, the goddess of agriculture, marked the calendar, with moments of hope and thanksgiving. These ceremonies, simple yet profound, connected farmers to cycles far larger than their fields. As you absorb this glimpse into rural Roman life, you may wonder, how did the pressures of empire shape the daily existence of these farmers over time? Did innovations in agriculture trickle down from the cities to the countryside, or did tradition hold sway? And what of those who toiled anonymously, their names lost to history, but whose labor sustained millions? These questions invite you to linger in the quiet fields a while longer before we continue deeper into the story of Roman farmers. As the sun climbs higher over the Roman countryside, the farmer's work intensifies. The seasons dictate the rhythm of life, and each task carries weight far beyond its apparent simplicity. You stand beside the fields, observing how farmers carefully rotated crops to preserve soil fertility, a practice rooted in centuries of experience rather than formal science. Wheat might give way to legumes, which enriched the earth with nitrogen, supporting a cycle that balanced the land's health with the need to feed growing populations. Irrigation systems, though basic by modern standards, reveal a subtle ingenuity. Channels carved into the earth guided water from the Nile's tributaries or mountain springs to thirsty fields. Simple tools like the shadoofa hand-operated lever with a bucket helped lift water, conserving precious moisture during dry spells. The community often gathered to maintain these systems, blending labor with social connection. Beyond agriculture, animal husbandry played a vital role. Goats, sheep, and cattle not only provided food, but also materials like wool and leather, essential for clothing and tools. You might imagine the farmer tending to his flock at dusk, counting sheep as the day's work concludes, while family members prepare food and mend tools by lamplight. Economic pressures were a constant companion. Land ownership was often concentrated in the hands of wealthy patricians, leaving small farmers vulnerable to debt or loss of property. Taxation, imposed by the Roman state to fund armies and infrastructure, could be unforgiving. You sense the quiet resilience required to navigate these challenges, balancing hope for a good harvest with the realities of political and social structures beyond one's control. The farmer's relationship with the land was also spiritual. Sacred groves and altars dotted the landscape, places where offerings were made to deities believed to influence growth and weather. Festivals like the Ambervalia involved ritual processions to bless the fields, reinforcing the community's connection to nature and the divine. Markets in nearby towns offered farmers opportunities to trade surplus grain or livestock. Here, amidst the chatter and barter, you hear stories from distant provinces, news from the capital, and the subtle negotiations that kept rural economies afloat. These gatherings were as much social hubs as economic centers, weaving the fabric of Roman rural society, yet many questions linger. How did changes in empire wars, shifting borders, and political reforms impact the farmers' daily reality? What strategies did they develop to survive bad seasons or political turmoil? And how did their quiet perseverance help sustain one of history's greatest civilizations? As the day draws to a close, these questions hover like the evening mist, inviting you to stay with the farmers a little longer. You step through the heavy wooden door of a small, dimly lit shop tucked into the winding streets of a medieval town. The scent of dried herbs, crushed roots, and earthy powders fills the air, mingling with the faint aroma of beeswax candles flickering on wooden shelves. This is the apothecary's domain, a place where ancient knowledge and everyday needs intersect in quiet, methodical ways. The apothecary, neither a doctor nor a mere merchant, occupies a unique position in medieval society. His days begin early, often before sunrise, preparing medicines from plants, minerals, and animal products. Unlike the physicians who relied on classical texts and theory, the apothecary's work was hands-on and practical, focused on crafting remedies to soothe the ailments of townsfolk. Imagine him grinding roots with a mortar and pestle, carefully measuring doses of herbs like willow bark, known for its pain-relieving properties, or lavender, valued for calming restless minds. Each preparation required skill, the right timing, correct proportions, and knowledge passed down through generations or gleaned from monastic manuscripts. The shop itself was more than a pharmacy. Shelves lined with labeled jars displayed ingredients, both common and exotic dried chamomile flowers, powdered ambergris, crushed pearls, and powdered dragon's blood resin. The apothecary had to know the source and quality of each item, often bartering with traveling merchants to replenish supplies. Clients arrived with a variety of complaints: aches, digestive troubles, skin conditions, and left with prescriptions tailored to their symptoms. Remedies might come as teas, poultices, ointments, or pills made from honey and wax. The apothecary's expertise lay in blending these ingredients to balance the body's humors, a medical theory inherited from ancient Greek thought but adapted in the medieval context. Despite the routine, each day presented puzzles. How to treat a persistent cough without modern antibiotics? What herbs might ease the fever that often preceded deadly infections? The apothecary worked in a world where observation and trial were paramount, constantly adjusting his mixtures. In the face of uncertainty, the shop was also a place of quiet learning. Apprentices studied under the apothecary's watchful eye, learning not just recipes, but the art of patient listening and subtle diagnosis. Knowledge was a treasured commodity, shared cautiously yet essential to community health. As the day unfolds, the apothecary's presence is woven into the town's fabrica, steady reassurance amid the unpredictability of medieval life. Yet, questions remain. How did apothecaries balance tradition with emerging ideas in medicine? What role did superstition and ritual play alongside herbal remedies? And how did these early healers pave the way for modern pharmacy? These open questions invite you to settle deeper into the world of the medieval apothecary, where science, tradition, and hope intertwine in everyday healing. The morning light filters through narrow windows into the apothecary's workspace, revealing rows of carefully labeled containers and bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling beams. The apothecary begins his detailed preparations for the day, blending, measuring, and sometimes fermenting ingredients that have traveled great distances from local meadows to far-off lands, brought by merchants along ancient trade routes. You, Watch as he skillfully pounds dried rose hips, rich in vitamin C, into a fine powder meant to ward off the dreaded scurvy that plagued sailors and townsfolk alike. Nearby, the mortar holds a mixture of dried sage and honey, intended to soothe a sore throat. The apothecary's hands move with practiced precision, but his eyes are sharp and observant, always mindful of the nuances that might affect her remedies. Effectiveness, while rooted in tradition, the apothecary's practice was not static. Medieval medicine was a complex tapestry, blending inherited Galenic theory with empirical knowledge and superstition. The belief in the four hues, phlegm, yellow, bile, and black, dominated medical thought. The apothecary sought to restore balance within the body, using herbs that were classified as hot or cold, wet or dry. In an attempt to counteract illness, clients came with ailments ranging from the mundane to the mysterious. For a persistent cough, the apothecary might recommend a syrup infused with mullein and licorice root, while a feverish patient might receive a cooling salve made from comfrey and chamomile. His remedies often came with advice on diet, rest, and even prayer, reflecting the intertwined nature of medicine and spirituality. Superstition also played a subtle role. Some remedies were accompanied by charms or rituals reciting prayers, while applying an ointment or carrying a small sachet of herbs to ward off evil spirits. While these practices might seem quaint now, they offered psychological comfort and a sense of control in an unpredictable world. The apothecary's shop served as a hub of information and community. Neighbors exchanged news and remedies, and the apothecary occasionally served as an informal counselor, listening to worries as carefully as he measured ingredients. Apprentices learned not only the art of compounding medicines, but also the importance of empathy and immisceration. Yet the profession faced challenges. Competition with physicians and barber surgeons sometimes created tension. Licensing was irregular, and the quality of apothecaries varied widely. Despite this, their role was indispensable, especially in towns where access to physicians was limited. Reflecting on these daily rhythms, you might ask, how did apothecaries influence the transition from medieval to early modern medicine? In what ways did their empirical approach lay foundations for later scientific discoveries? And how did they balance skepticism with tradition in an era before modern clinical trials? These questions linger, inviting you to delve further into the nuanced world of medieval healing. As twilight descends over the medieval town, the apothecary carefully cleans his tools and organizes the remaining herbs for the next day. His shop, though modest, represents a place of hope amid the uncertainty of medieval health. The apothecary's work was a blend of craft, knowledge, and intuition, a delicate balance maintained in a world without modern laboratories or pharmaceuticals. Throughout the centuries, apothecaries gradually formalized their practices. By the late Middle Ages, guilds began to regulate the profession, setting standards for training and quality control. This shift helped to professionalize apothecaries, distinguishing them from untrained herbalists and quacks. Though many challenges persisted, you can imagine the apothecary's role evolving over time, from a local healer relying on folk remedies, to a learned practitioner with access to expanding knowledge through manuscripts and translations of ancient texts. The Renaissance would later open doors to scientific inquiry, but the foundations laid by these medieval healers were essential stepping stones. Moreover, apothecaries played a vital social role. They were often the first point of contact for the sick, especially the poor who could not afford physicians. Their advice extended beyond remedies, encompassing dietary suggestions, lifestyle guidance, and sometimes spiritual comfort. Yet, the tension between tradition and progress remained. Some remedies were effective, while others were ineffective or even harmful. The absence of standardized testing meant success was often judged by anecdote and observation. This uncertainty shaped a profession that had to be both cautious and creative. As you rest now, consider the legacy of the medieval apothecary, a figure straddling the line between superstition and science, a custodian of ancient wisdom and emerging knowledge. How does this history shape our modern understanding of medicine and healing? What might it teach us about patience, observation, and the human desire to care for one another in times of vulnerability? With these thoughts, drift gently toward sleep, comforted by the quiet dedication of healers long past, whose humble efforts ripple through time. You step into a small village nestled among the gentle hills of Edo period Japan, where the cycles of nature dictate the rhythm of life with quiet certainty. The changing seasons are not just a passage of time, but a profound force shaping every task, ritual, and survival strategy of the villagers who call this place home. Here, life unfolds in harmony with the land, the weather, and centuries of tradition. As winter melts slowly into spring, you observe villagers preparing for the year ahead. The hard frost that once gripped the soil begins to loosen, and farmers ready their fields for planting rice, the staple that sustains families and communities. Rice paddies, carefully flooded and tended, demand patience and precision, with planting timed to the rains and the warmth of the sun. Tools are simple but effective: wooden hose, bamboo baskets, and handmade irrigation channels direct water through the fields. Villagers work together in cooperative groups, sharing labor and knowledge to ensure a successful season. This communal effort is more than practicality. It is a social fabric binding neighbors in mutual reliance. Beyond agriculture, the villagers prepare their homes for the shifting climate. In autumn, they gather and store firewood, harvest chestnuts, and dry persimmons fruits that will provide sustenance during the colder months. Tatami mats are aired and replaced, paper screens repaired to keep out drafts, and thick quilts sewn by hand to provide warmth. Seasonal festivals mark these transitions with quiet celebration and reflection. The planting season is greeted with prayers to deities for a bountiful harvest, while the arrival of autumn brings rituals honoring ancestors and the turning of the earth. These moments blend spirituality with practicality, reinforcing a shared respect for the natural world. Daily life reflects a deep understanding of seasonal changes. Villagers adjust their diets, consuming cooling foods in summer and nourishing broths in winter. Clothing shifts from lightweight cotton to layered silks and hemp, always mindful of comfort and function. Yet the seasons also bring challenges: typhoons, floods, and harsh winters that test the resilience of the community. To meet these threats, villagers built homes with flexible wooden frames and steep thatched roofs designed to shed heavy rains and withstand winds. Drainage ditches and terraced fields help control water flow, protecting crops and homes alike. As you absorb this serene world, you might wonder, how did these rhythms shape not just survival but the culture and identity of Idawara villagers? How did knowledge pass between generations to maintain harmony with nature? And how did these traditions persist or change as Japan moved toward modernization? These questions invite you to step deeper into the quiet, enduring world of Edo Japan's rural life. As the seasons shift from the gentle bloom of spring to the humid heat of summer, the villagers' lives adjust with practiced ease. Rice paddies, once carefully planted, now demand constant attention. The young shoots rise steadily from the flooded fields, and the villagers work to keep weeds at bay, hand-weeding rows with long wooden tools while ensuring that irrigation channels remain clear and flowing. Community cooperation is crucial during this time. Water rights are carefully managed to ensure that each paddy receives its share. A delicate balance maintained by village elders who settle disputes with calm authority. Festivals such as the Obon provide moments of respite, honoring ancestors and inviting blessings for the harvest to come. These celebrations are modest yet deeply meaningful, marked by lanterns floating on rivers and quiet prayers whispered beneath the stars. Beyond the fields, villagers engage in seasonal crafts. Bamboo is harvested and split to create fishing traps, while silkworm cultivation is tended by dedicated families, producing the fine threads woven into the clothing worn throughout the year. Women and children often gather wild herbs and medicinal plants in nearby forests. Knowledge passed down from mother to daughter with care. Daily diets evolve with the season. Cooling dishes like chilled noodles and pickled vegetables help combat the summer heat, while communal meals often feature freshly caught fish from local streams. Preservation techniques, such as drying and fermenting, are vital skills for ensuring food stores during leaner months. Despite the harmony, challenges persist. Sudden summer storms can devastate crops, and pests threaten both fields and silkworms. Villagers rely on traditional knowledge, applying natural repellents made from garlic or chrysanthemum, adjusting planting schedules, and performing rituals to protect their livelihoods. The line between practical farming and spiritual practice remains blurred, with respect for unseen forces guiding many decisions. As summer wanes and autumn approaches, preparations begin anew. The community harvests rice and other crops, storing grains carefully in elevated granaries to protect them from moisture and rodents. Families mend clothing and reinforce homes in anticipation of the cold season. Autumn festivals bring renewed communal spirit, celebrating abundance and expressing gratitude. These rhythms of work and rest, abundance and scarcity, reveal a society deeply attuned to its environment. The villagers' ability to adapt, cooperate, and honor tradition ensured their survival in a land shaped by nature's changing moods. You might now wonder, how did Idawara villagers balance isolation with connection to larger political and economic systems? What impact did emerging technologies have on these age-old practices? And how did the villagers' intimate knowledge of their environment influence Japan's broader cultural identity? These questions prepare you to move closer to the story's conclusion. As autumn deepens into winter, the village settles into a quieter rhythm. The harvest is stored safely, fields lie fallow under a blanket of frost, and families gather indoors, warming themselves beside irori hearths. The preparation for cold months is a collective effort. Thick quilts are sewn, paper screens reinforced, and wooden shutters secured against winter winds. You can imagine the hushed evenings when villagers share stories, passed down through generations of past winters, lessons learned from nature's harsh tests, and hopes for the coming spring. These narratives, often simple, carry wisdom that shaped the community's resilience. The architecture itself reflects this seasonal mindfulness. Houses built with flexible timber frames allow for quick repairs after storms, while steep thatched roofs prevent heavy snow buildup. Earthen floors are often covered with woven mats to retain warmth, and smoke from hearth fires circulates through small vents designed to minimize drafts. Yet, winter is not just a time of hardship, but of reflection and planning. The villagers use these months to repair tools, weave baskets, and prepare for the cycle to begin again. The patience and adaptability evident in these routines reveal a deep respect for the natural world and its demands. This seasonal cycle influenced more than just survival. It shaped cultural values like harmony, wa, patience, 90, and community cooperation, Kyoto. These principles became central to Edo period rural life and left a lasting imprint on Japanese society. As you let this gentle story settle in your mind, consider the subtle ways humans adapt to their environments, how routine, ritual, and shared knowledge become anchors in an ever-changing world. What lessons might modern life draw from the quiet, enduring wisdom of these villagers? How does their intimate dance with the seasons speak to our own search for balance? With these thoughts, you drift softly toward rest, wrapped in the timeless rhythms of Edo, Japan. You stand on the vast plains of East Africa, where the horizon stretches endlessly beneath an open sky. Here, the Maasai people have lived for centuries, their lives intertwined with the rhythm of the land and the herds that sustain them. Far from bustling cities or political capitals, the Maasai's daily existence revolves around cattle, symbols of wealth, social status, and survival. Imagine the early morning light casting long shadows as warriors, known as Morans, prepare to lead the cattle out to graze. These animals are not merely livestock. They are central to the Maasai identity, nourishing bodies and souls through milk, blood, and occasional meat. The herding routines are precise, dictated by seasons, weather, and the availability of grass and water. The Maasai's knowledge of their environment is deep and detailed. They understand the migratory patterns of animals, the growth cycles of grasses, and the subtle signs of impending drought or flood. This intimate awareness allows them to navigate the sometimes harsh savanna, moving herds strategically to ensure their survival. Beyond herding, rituals play a vital role. Circumcision ceremonies mark the transition from boyhood to warriorhood, binding individuals to the community and its values. These rites are accompanied by songs, dances, and storytelling, preserving oral histories that reinforce social cohesion and cultural identity. The Maasai also practice traditional healing, using herbs and spiritual ceremonies to address illness and misfortune. Elders serve as custodians of this knowledge, balancing practical medicine with belief in ancestral spirits and natural forces. Social structures are intricate. Age sets organize community roles, and elders hold authority, guiding decisions that affect the welfare of the group. Women, though often less visible in popular narratives, contribute essential labor from milk processing to crafting jewelry and hold significant influence within families. Despite external pressures from colonialism, modernization, and environmental change, many Maasai communities maintain these traditions. Yet, challenges loom. Land restrictions, climate shifts, and economic changes threaten the herding lifestyle. As you absorb the vastness of the plains and the richness of Maasai culture, questions arise. How have these traditions adapted to the modern world? What practices have endured, and which have evolved or faded? And how does the Maasai experience deepen our understanding of human resilience in the face of change? These reflections invite you to journey further into the world of the Maasai. As the sun climbs higher over the savanna, the Maasai's connection to their herds deepens in daily practice. Herding is not a solitary task, but a communal one, requiring coordination among warriors elders, and sometimes children. Each morning, the Morans lead the cattle to fresh grazing grounds, their movements deliberate and informed by generations of environmental knowledge. The Maasai employ a system of seasonal migration, moving herds in response to rainfall patterns and grass availability. During dry seasons, water sources become scarce, and the community must carefully manage their livestock to prevent overgrazing. This delicate balance reflects a profound understanding of ecological limits, honed over centuries. Social rituals intersect with these movements. Before embarking on a migration or a significant herding journey, ceremonies are performed to bless the cattle and ensure protection. These rituals involve prayers, dances, and the symbolic sharing of milk and blood, which serve both spiritual and social functions, strengthening bonds between community members and reaffirming their shared dependence on the land and animals. Women's roles, while often understated in external portrayals, are central to Maasai survival. They process milk into butter and cheese, craft intricate beadwork that carries cultural significance, and maintain household structures that support the community's well-being. Their expertise complements the men's herding, creating a balanced economy of labor and knowledge. Elders act as decision-makers and keepers of oral history, guiding the community through challenges such as droughts, conflicts, and changing political landscapes. Their wisdom shapes resource management and conflict resolution, ensuring that traditions adapt without losing their core values. Yet the Maasai face modern pressures that test their resilience. Land privatization, national borders, and economic development threaten traditional migratory routes. Education and urban migration draw younger generations away from herding. Despite these forces, many Maasai strive to preserve their heritage, blending old customs with new realities. You might wonder, how do the Maasai negotiate the tension between tradition and change? What strategies have helped them sustain their culture and livelihoods? And how do their experiences inform broader conversations about indigenous rights and environmental stewardship? These questions deepen the story, inviting you to continue exploring the enduring spirit of the Maas as the day wanes over the sweeping plains. The Maasai gather around evening fires, sharing stories that weave together history, identity, and hope. These narratives, passed orally through generations, preserve the essence of a culture deeply connected to its environment and traditions. The communal life of the Maasai revolves around rituals that punctuate the agricultural and herding calendar. Age-set ceremonies mark transitions not only in personal status but also in social responsibility. The warrior class, or Morans, are charged with protecting cattle and community, embodying ideals of bravery and loyalty. In these quiet moments, the interplay of tradition and adaptation is evident. Some Maasai communities have embraced education, engaging with wider economic opportunities while maintaining core customs. Others have advocated for land rights, seeking to protect grazing territories essential for their pastoral lifestyle. The Maasai's relationship with their cattle remains central, symbolizing wealth, social ties, and spiritual well-being. Milk and blood continue to be dietary staples, prepared with careful techniques that honor ancestral knowledge. The herding strategies, refined through centuries, reflect sustainable practices attuned to the fragile ecosystems of East Africa. Yet challenges persist. Climate change brings unpredictable rains, altering pasture availability. Government policies sometimes restrict movement, complicating traditional migratory routes. The pull of modern life tempts youth away from rural communities, threatening cultural continuity. Despite these pressures, the Maasai demonstrate resilience through flexibility and unity. Elders guide adaptations, ensuring that change does not erase identity. Women's contributions in household management and cultural preservation remain vital, though often underrepresented in external narratives. Reflecting on the Maasai experience offers broader insights into human adaptability and the importance of cultural heritage. Their story invites us to consider how traditions can coexist with modern realities and how respect for environment and community forms the foundation of survival. As you drift towards sleep, wrapped in this tale of endurance and connection, ponder the delicate balance between preserving the past and embracing the future. What lessons might the Maasai's journey hold for all of us navigating a rapidly changing world? As evening descends on the endless plains, the Maasai gather around fires, their voices weaving stories of ancestors, cattle, and survival. The glow of flames illuminates faces marked by years of sun and wind, each wrinkle a testament to endurance. In a challenging landscape, these stories serve as a living archive, transmitting wisdom and values to younger generations. The age-set system continues to structure social life, with the Morans embodying both warrior strength and the responsibility to protect herds and community. Ceremonies marking transitions from boyhood to manhood, or from warrior to elder, occasions of collective reflection and reaffirmation of identity. Despite the pressure of modernization, many Maasai have maintained their herding traditions, adapting migration routes or incorporating new technologies while striving to preserve cultural heritage. Women's roles, often less visible to outsiders, remain essential, processing milk, crafting beadwork, and sustaining family life. Challenges such as climate change, land loss, and economic shifts test the community's resilience. Yet, through adaptability and strong social cohesion, the Maasai navigates these changes, balancing continuity with transformation. This story invites reflection on the intricate relationship between culture, environment, and survival. How do traditions endure when faced with rapid change? What lessons can be learned from the Maasai's profound connection to their land and livestock? As you drift toward rest, carry with you the quiet strength of a people whose lives are woven with the rhythms of nature and the enduring ties of community. Picture a smoky workshop nestled on the edge of a Viking village, where the clanging of hammer against anvil rings out like the heartbeat of the community. This is the domain of the blacksmither craftsman whose skill and strength forged the very tools and weapons that shaped Viking life and legend. Though overshadowed by tales of raiders and kings, the blacksmith's work was essential to survival and expansion. You enter the workshop, the air thick with heat and the scent of burning coal. Sparks fly as the smith bends red-hot iron, shaping blades that will cut through flesh and wood alike. Every strike of the hammer demands precision. A flawed sword could mean death in battle. Beyond weapons, blacksmiths crafted everyday items for ships, farming tools, household utensils, all vital to the village's economy. The process was arduous. Iron ore had to be extracted and smelted, charcoal produced from local woodlands to fuel the forge, and tools painstakingly shaped and tempered. Blacksmiths often inherited their craft through families, mastering techniques that combined artistry with practical knowledge of metallurgy. Despite their crucial role, blacksmiths occupied a liminal space in Viking society, respected for their skill but sometimes viewed with suspicion or awe due to their control over fire and metal. Rituals and taboos surrounded their craft, reflecting a belief in the mysterious power of transformation. Their work connected the domestic and martial worlds, supporting the community's daily needs and its ambitions for exploration and conquest. The ships that sailed to distant shores, the axes wielded in raids, the plows turning soil all bore the mark of the blacksmith's hammer, yet many questions remain. How did blacksmiths balance tradition with innovation? What challenges did they face in sourcing materials or passing down knowledge? And how did their craft evolve as Viking society changed? These thoughts invite you to peer deeper into the workshop, uncovering the hidden labor behind the saga. The forge glows fiercely as the Viking blacksmith begins his day, surrounded by the tools and raw materials that fuel his craft. Iron ore, painstakingly gathered from local bogs or traded from distant lands, lies nearby, while piles of charcoal burn steadily to maintain the intense heat needed to shape metal. Every step in the forging process demands skill and patience. The blacksmith's work began with smelting, extracting usable iron from ore. This was a laborious, smoky process carried out in bloomery furnaces, where heat and bellows combined to produce a malleable iron bloom. Once cooled and cleaned, this iron would be reheated and hammered into shape. Crafting a sword or axe was more than hammering metal. It required careful heating and cooling cycles, quenching and tempering. Achieve the right balance of hardness and flexibility. A poorly tempered blade could snap in battle. So the blacksmith's knowledge was a matter of life and death, beyond weaponry. Blacksmiths made farming implements, nails for shipbuilding, cooking utensils, and even decorative items. Their versatility made them indispensable to both Viking homes and expeditions. Each item bore marks of their expertise, sometimes adorned with simple engravings or symbolic motifs. Training was often familial. Sons apprenticed under fathers, learning techniques passed down through generations. The craft blended practical knowledge with an almost mystical respect for fire's transformative power. Some believed blacksmiths held special spiritual significance, mediating between raw nature and human civilization. However, sourcing materials posed constant challenges. High-quality iron ore was scarce and valued. Trade networks extending across Europe and Asia helped supply metals like tin and copper, essential for making bronze and other alloys. Blacksmiths had to adapt their skills based on available resources, innovating within constraints. The social position of blacksmiths was complex. Though vital, they were sometimes viewed warily due to associations with fire and metalworking magic. Folklore often portrayed smiths as figures of power and mystery, straddling the boundary between the natural and supernatural dots. As Viking society shifted expanding trade, settling new lands, the demands on blacksmiths evolved. They experimented with new techniques, influenced by contacts abroad, contributing quietly to the material culture that underpinned Viking success. You may wonder, how did these craftspeople navigate their ambiguous social status? What innovations did they introduce that shaped Viking technology? And how did their craft influence broader European metallurgy? These questions beckon you to linger by the forge, listening to the steady rhythm of hammer and anvil as history unfolds in sparks and steel dot. As the day fades into evening, the blacksmith finishes the final touches on a sword destined for a Viking warrior. Each blade tells a story not only of battles fought, but of the skill, patience, and innovation behind its creation. The blacksmith's art was a vital, if often overlooked, thread in the fabric of Viking society. The The transition from simple iron tools to more complex weaponry reflects broader shifts in Viking culture, as raids became more organized and settlements expanded. The demand for durable, effective arms and tools grew. Blacksmiths played a crucial role in meeting these needs, blending tradition with new influences acquired through contact with other cultures. Evidence suggests Viking smiths experimented with pattern welding, twisting iron strips to create strong, flexible blades with distinctive designs. This technique not only improved functionality but also added aesthetic value, making weapons symbols of status and identity. Beyond metallurgy, blacksmiths contributed to shipbuilding by producing nails, rivets, and fittings essential for the famed longships that enabled Viking exploration. Their work supported not only warfare but trade, migration, and cultural exchange. Despite their importance, blacksmiths remained on the margins of recorded history, their lives glimpsed mainly through archaeological finds and sparse references. Their workshops were spaces of transformation, turning raw earth into tools that shaped the course of history. Reflecting on their story, consider the quiet impact of craftsmanship on civilization's trajectory. How did the skills of these artisans illuminate the connections between technology, culture, and power? What can their legacy teach us about the often unseen labor behind great historical events? As you drift towards sleep, hold in mind the steady clang of hammer on anvil, timeless rhythm echoing through the centuries, reminding us that behind every legendary saga lies the work of hands and fire. Imagine stepping through a low-arched doorway into a bustling Ottoman coffee house or Kovahain in the heart of Istanbul during the 16th century. The rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans mingles with the murmur of conversation and the gentle clatter of cups and saucers. This is no ordinary cafe, it is a vibrant social hub where ideas, stories, and politics brew alongside the dark, bitter beverage. Coffee was introduced to the Ottoman Empire in the early 1500s, quickly gaining popularity beyond the palace walls to the streets and neighborhoods. The Kovahain became a central fixture of urban life, offering a space for men to gather, sip their coffee slowly, and engage in everything from poetry, recitals, and music to debates about religion and governance. The preparation of coffee itself was a ritual. Beans were roasted in small pans, ground finely with a mortar and pestle, and brewed in special pots called sesfus over hot coals. The resulting drink was served in small, handleless cups, often accompanied by sweet treats like lokum, Turkish delight. The experience was as much about ceremony as it was about flavor. Coffee houses varied widely, from modest street corners to opulent rooms with plush cushions and intricate tile work. They attracted a diverse clientele: merchants, scholars, artists, and government officials. In these spaces, news was exchanged, alliances formed, and sometimes dissent quietly voiced. Yet, the rise of coffee houses was not without controversy. Authorities occasionally viewed them as hotbeds of sedition and idleness, fearing that the conversations within might challenge established order. At times, bans on coffee or coffee houses were enacted, only to be lifted again as the beverage's popularity proved unstoppable. Beyond social and political functions, coffee houses influenced Ottoman culture deeply. They fostered literary traditions, inspired music and storytelling, and even shaped daily routines around the ritual of coffee drinking. As you settle into this scene, you might wonder, how did coffee houses transform public life in the Ottoman Empire? What roles did they play in community building and information exchange? And how did this seemingly simple drink become a catalyst for cultural change? These questions invite you to linger in the smoky air of the Coverhane, absorbing the layered history of coffee and companionship. As the sun climbs higher over Istanbul's sprawling skyline, the coffee houses begin to fill with an eclectic crowd. Merchants discuss trade routes stretching from the Mediterranean to the Silk Road. Poets recite verses inspired by love and loss, and scholars debate the mysteries of philosophy and theology. The Coverhane is a melting pot of ideas and ambitions, a place where the ordinary and extraordinary converge over steaming cups. The coffeehouse's atmosphere encouraged a democratic spirit unusual for its time. Men from various social classes shared space, engaging in conversations that crossed typical societal boundaries. This openness made coffeehouses hubs for the exchange of news and ideas, some official, some whispered, thus earning reputations as centers of both enlightenment and suspicion. The layout of these establishments reflected their multifaceted role. Low tables and cushions invited relaxation and prolonged visits, while walls often displayed calligraphy or paintings that celebrated Ottoman achievements or moral lessons. Games like backgammon and chess were common, blending leisure with strategy and social interaction. Importantly, coffeehouses became crucibles for the arts. Storytellers, known as medders, captivated audiences with tales ranging from epic romances to comic anecdotes. Musicians played traditional instruments like the oud and ney, providing a soundtrack to the lively chatter. Poets and writers found inspiration and patronage within these vibrant spaces, influencing the literary culture of the empire. Despite their cultural richness, coffeehouses also attracted official scrutiny. Authorities sometimes feared that the free flow of ideas could foment dissent or sedition. Attempts to regulate or close coffeehouses occurred sporadically, often driven by religious leaders concerned about moral laxity or political authorities wary of rebellious plots. Yet coffee's grip on the public remained strong, making bans difficult to enforce. This tension between control and freedom imbued the Coverhane with a subtle political dimension. Here, ideas spread that challenged orthodoxy, questioned authority, and inspired movements. Quiet revolutions brewed in ceramic cups. As you savor this layered scene, you might ponder, how did coffeehouses influence the spread of political and philosophical ideas in the Ottoman Empire? What role did they play in shaping public opinion and community identity? And how did the interplay of leisure and discourse in these spaces foreshadow modern cafes and social hubs? These questions deepen your journey into the secret life of Ottoman coffeehouses. As evening descends over Istanbul, the coffeehouses take on a quieter, more reflective atmosphere. The day's bustling conversations soften into whispered debates and shared confidences. The Coverhane remains a vital space not just for drinking coffee but for forging connections, exchanging news, and nurturing a communal sense of belonging. By the 17th century, coffeehouses had become deeply embedded in Ottoman social life, influencing everything from literature to politics. They acted as informal hubs where poets gathered to share new works, musicians experimented with compositions, and intellectuals debated pressing questions of the day. This vibrant cultural milieu contributed to what some historians describe as a kind of early public sphere within the empire. The role of coffeehouses extended beyond mere entertainment. They functioned as sites of social leveling, where distinctions of class, profession, and ethnicity were, at least temporarily, set aside in favor of shared experience. This blending fostered networks of communication that could both support and challenge established power structures. Yet coffee houses also navigated ongoing tensions with religious and political authorities. While coffee itself was occasionally condemned as a stimulant that distracted from spiritual duties, its widespread appeal ensured its survival and growth. Authorities' ambivalence toward coffee houses, both wary and fascinated, reflected the complex interplay of control, commerce, and culture. As the night deepens, the ritual of coffee drinking remains a symbol of hospitality and connection. The careful preparation and slow savoring of coffee invite mindfulness and social engagement, anchoring daily life in moments of pause and reflection. Reflecting on this rich history, consider how a simple beverage became a catalyst for cultural exchange and social change. How did Ottoman coffee houses shape the dynamics of public life? What can their story teach us about the power of shared spaces and rituals to transform societies? With these thoughts, drift gently into rest, enveloped by the warm, enduring aroma of history's quiet conversations. You find yourself in the bustling city of ancient Rome, far from the roaring crowds of the Colosseum, stepping instead into the quieter, more private world of a gladiator's daily life. While gladiators are often remembered solely for their deadly combat in the arena, their lives beyond the spectacle reveal a complex existence shaped by discipline, survival, and a strange mixture of admiration and marginalization. Gladiators were typically slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals. But some volunteered for the profession, driven by the promise of fame, money, or social advancement. Their lives were dictated by rigorous training regimens, strict diets, and constant physical conditioning under the watchful eyes of their lanester trainers and managers who owned and oversaw gladiator schools, known as Ludi. In the early morning light, the Lannister's school stirs awake. Rows of wooden training weapons are arranged neatly alongside rudimentary weights and wrestling mats. The smell of sweat, dust, and the sharp timbres of iron fills the air. Gladiators begin their day with warm-up exercises designed to prevent injury and build strength. Movements are precise and repetitive, cultivating muscle memory for deadly strikes and defensive maneuvers. The Lannister is both coach and overseer, a figure demanding obedience, but also responsible for the gladiator's survival. After all, each man is an investment. Injuries are common, and while the spectacle demands fierce combat, overly reckless fighting can shorten a gladiator's career and reduce the Lannister's profits. Gladiators specialized in various fighting styles, each with distinctive armor and weapons. The Murmillo, for example, wore a helmet adorned with a fish-shaped crest and wielded a short sword and large shield, while the Retiarius fought with a net and trident, relying on speed and agility rather than heavy armor. Training sessions included mock battles to hone these specialized skills. Despite their status, gladiators were often given better food and medical care than ordinary slaves, as their health directly affected their performance and market value. Meals were high in carbohydrates, including barley and legumes, designed to build stamina and maintain weight. Recent archaeological studies suggest gladiators even consumed a type of ash drink, rich in calcium, to strengthen bones after intense training. Outside the training grounds, gladiators lived in communal barrack Spartan quarters, where camaraderie developed among men bound by the constant presence of danger. These quarters were simple: wooden beds, shared latrines, and little privacy. The social hierarchy within the barracks reflected fighting ability, seniority, and the favor of the Lannister. Personal lives were constrained but not absent, Gladiators formed friendships, rivalries, and sometimes romantic relationships within the community. They celebrated birthdays or victories with modest feasts, often accompanied by singing or storytelling, that allowed momentary escape from the brutal realities of their profession. Their status in Roman society was paradoxical. While admired for bravery and skill, gladiators were also stigmatized as entertainers and slaves, often excluded from respectable social circles. Yet, successful gladiators could achieve celebrity status, winning freedom or lucrative rewards, and inspiring admiration among commoners and emperors alike. The preparation for a fight was an elaborate process. Gladiators underwent rituals that blended superstition with practical readiness. They might visit temples to invoke protection from gods like Mars or Hercules, or receive charms and amulets believed to ward off injury. The psychological toll was immense. Knowing that every bout could end in death demanded mental resilience. As much as physical strength, as the day unfolds, you might reflect on the layered realities of gladiators' lives. How did they reconcile their brutal profession with moments of hope and camaraderie? What did freedom mean in a world where life was perpetually on the edge? And how did their stories influence Roman culture's complex relationship with violence, entertainment, and power? These questions linger, inviting you to explore deeper the daily rhythms beyond the arena's glare. As the sun rises higher, the gladiators continue their daily routine, a demanding cycle of training, rest, and preparation. The day is punctuated by the clang of wooden swords striking shields, the grunts of exertion, and the occasional bark of the lanista urging more effort. Each movement, each drill, is a rehearsal for the moment when the sand of the arena will be stained with sweat and perhaps blood. Gladiatorial training was exhaustive and methodical. Fighters practiced footwork tirelessly to perfect their balance and speed vital skills for survival. They learned how to parry and counterattack, mastering the art of anticipating their opponent's moves. Training included wrestling, running, and strength exercises, ensuring they maintained peak physical condition. In between physical drills, gladiators attended to their bodies carefully. Roman medicine, though primitive by modern standards, offered treatments such as herbal salves and poultices to treat wounds and bruises. A physician or medicus assigned to the ludus monitored their health, applying remedies and advising on nutrition. The value of a healthy gladiator was not lost on the lanista, who saw these men as both athletes and investments. Mealtimes were communal, reinforcing bonds within the barracks. The staple diet porridge made of barley, beans, and dried fruits was supplemented with occasional meat and vegetables. Gladiators avoided excessive wine or rich foods that might slow them down. Instead, they favored foods that provided endurance and helped muscle recovery. Archaeological evidence shows they drank a tonic made from plant ashes, believed to fortify bones, a testament to their understanding of nutrition's role in physical performance. Life in the ludus also involved discipline and punishment. Rules were strict, and infractions, whether laziness, disrespect, or disobedience, were met with harsh consequences. Floggings and solitary confinement were common, reinforcing the authority of the lanista and the necessity of obedience in a world where one wrong move could mean death in the arena. Yet, despite the harshness, moments of levity and camaraderie broke through. Gladiators shared jokes, competed in friendly contests, and supported each other through the stresses of their lives. They formed brotherhoods, relying on trust and loyalty to face the dangers ahead. Outside the barracks, gladiators sometimes mingled with the city's population. Though often regarded as low status or even dishonored, some found admiration among the common folk, who saw them as heroes and symbols of strength. Gladiators occasionally received gifts or fan mail, and some even attracted lovers or patrons, who helped improve their conditions. The psychological weight of their profession was immense. Training not only forged physical strength, but also hardened mental resilience. Gladiators learned to suppress fear, manage pain, and prepare for the unpredictable chaos of combat. The constant threat of death created a bond between fighters, a shared understanding that life was fragile and fleeting. As the day closes, you might ponder, how did gladiators maintain hope and identity amid such brutality? What social and personal networks supported them? And how did their experiences shape Roman perceptions of honor, courage, and entertainment? These reflections set the stage for the concluding section of their story. As twilight falls over the city of Rome, the gladiators prepare for the ultimate test of their lives, the arena. The grandeur of the Colosseum looms ahead, its massive stone arches silhouetted against the darkening sky. But before the roar of the crowd and the clash of weapons, the quiet moments behind the scenes reveal a complex interplay of fear, ritual, and resolve. In the hours before a fight, gladiators engaged in mental preparation as much as physical warm-up. They donned their armor carefully, each piece chosen and fitted to maximize protection and mobility. The Lannister's attendants helped polish helmets, oil shields, and ready weapons, performing the essential but unseen labor that supported the spectacle. The gladiators often whispered prayers or recited personal mantras, seeking favor from gods, like Mars, the god of war, or Nemesis, the goddess of fate and retribution. Superstition and ritual helped calm nerves and gave a sense of control in a situation where uncertainty loomed large. Once in the arena, the performance began. Battles followed strict rules, and while life was often at risk, death was not guaranteed. Every time, gladiators fought to entertain, demonstrating skill and bravery in choreographed combat that balanced danger and showmanship. Victories brought acclaim and rewards. A gladiator who impressed the crowd might receive a wooden sword, symbolizing freedom, or win money and gifts. Such success could elevate a fighter's status, blurring the lines between slave and celebrity. Yet the threat of death was real and ever-present. Wounds could end careers or lives, and fallen fighters were carried away by attendants, their fate sealed by the crowd or the editor, the official overseeing the games. The audience's favor could mean mercy or execution, a grim reminder of the gladiator's precarious existence beyond the arena. Surviving gladiators returned to their barracks to rest, heal, and prepare for the next challenge. Their stories of endurance and resilience echoed in whispered conversations and songs, a testament to human will amidst harsh conditions. Reflecting on their lives reveals more than spectacle. It uncovers themes of survival, identity, and social complexity. Gladiators were more than entertainers. They were men navigating a world of violence and admiration, fear and fame. As you settle into sleep, carry with you the layered story of these warriors' lives forged in fire and steel, marked by courage and fragility alike. What echoes of their existence remain in our modern stories of heroism and endurance? How do their struggles resonate in the quiet moments beyond the arena's roar? You wake to the soft light of dawn filtering through narrow wooden shutters, the scent of dried lavender and rosemary lingering in the air. Outside, dew settles on low stone walls and thatched rooftops, as the small village stirs to life. This is medieval Europe perhaps, in England or the Rhineland, where illness is a daily concern and healing rests not in hospitals, but in the steady hands of herbalists and wise women. In a world without modern medicine, where the causes of sickness were still wrapped in mystery and myth, people turned to the natural world for answers. From monasteries to remote hamlets, the art of healing with herbs was a blend of observation, belief, trial, and error. You imagine yourself walking into the home of a local healer, low-ceilinged room filled with hanging bundles of dried plants, clay jars lining the shelves, and the bubbling sound of a gently simmering decoction over a fire. The medieval herbalist was not simply a gardener or a witch, but something in between, part scientist, part spiritual guide. She or sometimes he had memorized the uses and dangers of dozens of plants. Yarrow for staunching bleeding, chamomile for sleep, comfrey for bruises. Each remedy required knowledge of timing, proportion, and preparation. Roots harvested at dawn, leaves dried in shade, flowers gathered before the bloom peaked. Often, these herbalists learned their craft through oral tradition. Recipes and methods were handed down across generations, tucked away in memory or sometimes recorded in precious, hand-illustrated texts called herbals. These manuscripts listed plants alphabetically or by ailment, often combining classical Greek or Roman teachings with local folklore. The Physica of Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century nun and scholar, catalogued dozens of cures from fennel, water for digestion to lavender for melancholy. But herbal medicine wasn't limited to countryside. Cottages. In monasteries, monks tended physic gardens where medicinal herbs were cultivated with care. The Benedictine rule encouraged such labor as a service to God and the sick. Inside monastic infirmaries, patients might be treated with mulled wine, mixed with herbs or bathed in rosemary water while monks chanted prayers for healing. The spiritual and the physical were never far apart. Disease, however, was a constant and often terrifying presence. Plague, fevers, and infected wounds could strike without warning. With few effective treatments, herbal medicine was both a comfort and a gamble. People believed illness was caused by imbalances in the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Herbs were used not just to treat symptoms, but to restore balance within this framework. Cooling herbs for hot illnesses, drying herbs for wet ailments. Apothecaries, the precursors to pharmacists, emerged in growing towns. They kept detailed records of plant properties, maintained stocks of exotic imports like cinnamon or myrrh, and sold pills, poultices, and ointments to those who could afford them. Their shops were fragrant, chaotic spaces mortar and pestle grinding, scales weighing powders, labels handwritten on parchment tags. The line between medicine and superstition was often blurry. Some believed wearing a sachet of dried herbs like mugwort or angelica could ward off plague or bad spirits. Others tied garlic around the neck to protect from the evil eye. Healing was as much about belief and ritual as it was about botany. Healers might whisper incantations while applying a salve or invoke saints' names as they stirred a healing draught. Still, these remedies were not without results. Modern studies confirm that many herbs used in the Middle Ages have real medicinal properties. Willow bark, used for pain relief, contains salicin, a chemical similar to aspirin. Garlic has antimicrobial effects. Peppermint can ease nausea. In the absence of surgery or sterilization, Such remedies could make the difference between comfort and agony, or life and death. As you drift through the quiet world of the medieval healer, questions begin to stir. How did these practitioners learn which herbs were safe and which were deadly? What kinds of relationships existed between village healers and the larger religious or medical authorities? And how did people, despite such limited tools, navigate the challenge of healing in a world full of danger? Let these thoughts carry you toward the next chapter in this winding journey through time and medicine. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the monastery garden. Bees flit lazily between the flowering sage and marigolds, and the scent of thyme rises gently from the warm earth. This is the heartbeat of medieval medicine, silent, patient, and rooted in nature. In the quiet corners of walled gardens, behind the stalls of market apothecaries, and inside the homes of humble healers, knowledge of plants and their mysterious powers continues to grow. Herbal medicine in the medieval world was not isolated from broader cultural and religious beliefs. It was shaped by them. Practitioners understood illness through a spiritual and philosophical lens. The health of the body was inextricably linked to the soul, and healing was as much about moral balance as physical treatment. A fever might be seen not only as a bodily affliction but as a divine warning or punishment, prompting confession and prayer alongside herbal intervention. Inside monasteries, particularly Benedictine ones, gardens were arranged with careful intent. Plants were grouped by function: digestive aids, wound healers, purgatives, elderberry, shrubs, mint, borage, and foxglove grew in rows, each cared for by monks trained not just in theology, but in rudimentary botany. The monastic library might house a hand-copied version of Dioscorides de Materia Medica, a Roman text that listed hundreds of natural remedies. Over time, these texts were supplemented by Islamic scholarship. Arab physicians like Avicenna, whose canon of medicine influenced European healers deeply. At the same time, in rural villages far from such grand centers of learning, knowledge traveled more humbly from grandmother to granddaughter, from one healer to the next. A wise woman might spend her life walking the woods and meadows, learning through observation and experience. She knew where the yarrow grew wild, how to steep valerian root for a colicky baby, or how to make a compress of plantain leaves for an infected wound. Sometimes, these women were respected as essential members of their communities, called upon to deliver babies, tend the dying, or calm a panicked child. But depending on the place and time, such knowledge could also draw suspicion. The same woman praised for healing a sick cow might, years later, be accused of witchcraft if a crop failed or a neighbor fell ill. The thin boundary between healer and heretic was one walked carefully. In larger towns, apothecaries became increasingly organized. Some joined guilds, worked under licenses, or served alongside university-trained physicians. These early pharmacists were literate, often multilingual, and held shelves stocked with materials gathered from distant lands. Frankincense, saffron, sugar, cinnamon, and dried rose petals arrived via trade routes stretching from the Middle East to North Africa and beyond. Apothecaries meticulously recorded their recipes: ointments for cracked skin, elixirs for melancholy, powders for gout. They mixed honey with vinegar and herbs to create oxymels, ground dried roots with mortar and pestle, and sealed potions with wax and twine. For the wealthy, medicine could be elaborate gold leaf stirred into wine, pearls dissolved in vinegar, or bezoars, hardened animal masses believed to counter poison. Still, not all remedies were effective, and not all were safe. Some concoctions contained mercury, arsenic, or deadly nightshade. Purgatives and bloodletting were common, based on the belief that illness could be drawn out or expelled from the body. Leeching was used to rebalance humors, and enemas were sometimes administered with devices that would look more at home in a blacksmith shop than in a hospital. But it would be a mistake to assume medieval healers were naive. Their methods, while limited by the science of their time, were rooted in genuine observation. They watched what worked, they noted what failed, and they refined their techniques across generations. A midwife might keep a personal journal of births and remedies. A monk might annotate the margins of a herbal text with his own discoveries, best gathered after rain, or causes sleep to deep in the elderly. The relationship between healer and patient was intimate and ongoing. People returned again and again to trusted herbalists, not just for cures, but for reassurance, company, and the comfort of shared ritual. Sitting beside a hearth while mint tea simmered over a fire, the act of being cared for listened to as much a balm as the herbs themselves. As evening approaches, and candles flicker in the narrow windows of stone infirmaries and wooden huts alike, one begins to understand that medicine in this era was not merely a profession, was a way of seeing the world. To heal the body, one must observe nature, understand cycles, and believe in the invisible currents of spirit and humoral flow. And so you may wonder, how did these medieval healers cope with failure? What did they believe about the line between life and death? And how did centuries of observation and folklore shape the foundations of our modern understanding of health? These questions settle like dust on parchment, waiting for the next morning's light. Night falls gently across the village and the monastery alike, casting long shadows on cobbled streets and mossy garden walls. Inside, the scent of lavender and juniper fills the air, wafting from low-burning hearths and simmering pots. It's in these twilight hours that the practice of medieval herbal medicine, both sacred and humble, reveals its quiet endurance. The day's work is done, but the healer's mind is still awake, turning over remedies in memory and preparation for what tomorrow may bring. As the Middle Ages progressed into the later centuries, the body of herbal knowledge began to take deeper root across Europe. A patchwork of tradition, religion, observation, and imported knowledge formed the basis of healing practices in monasteries, homes, and burgeoning urban apothecaries. And at its heart remained a singular belief that nature, created by God, offered the means to heal those who lived within it. In the colder regions of Europe, especially during long winters, dried herbs became lifelines. Calendula flowers hung in rafters were rehydrated into compresses for burns. Dried nettle leaves were boiled for aching joints. Bay leaves, sage, and thyme were used in broths to ward off illness. Rural households often kept their own miniature apothecary chest or cupboard containing precious jars of herbal salves, beeswax candles, honeyed tonics, and bundled herbs wrapped in linen. Among these everyday tools, rituals developed, both practical and spiritual. Many healers whispered prayers or blessings as they applied ointments. Crosses were drawn with fingers soaked in rosemary water. Mothers might place basil under their children's pillows to chase away fevers or bad dreams. The line between medicine and magic was not always clear, and it wasn't meant to be. Healing in this era was a holistic endeavor, physical, emotional, spiritual. And yet, the world was changing. As printing presses emerged in the 15th century, knowledge that had once been passed from mouth to ear or from handwritten manuscript to apprentice began to spread in printed form. Early herbals, like John Gerard's herbal or William Turner's, A New Herbal, introduced English readers to the medical uses of hundreds of plants, some native, some imported. These books were not just lists of remedies, but guides to understanding the body in balance with nature. Meanwhile, trade routes brought new remedies to Europe from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Cloves, ginger, turmeric, and aloes entered the medieval pharmacopoeia. Some were praised as panaceas, others integrated into long-standing traditions. Apothecaries adapted, always experimenting, noting which foreign substances aligned with local ailments or belief systems. Women remained central to herbal healing throughout the Middle Ages, though they walked a precarious path. While respected in communities, women who displayed too much knowledge, especially in places where fear of heresy and witchcraft had taken root, could find themselves under suspicion. Inquisitions and witch trials of the later medieval and early modern periods sometimes targeted midwives and herbalists, whose remedies, misunderstood or envied, were twisted into accusations of devilry. Still, many women continued to practice in secret or in trusted circles. Their knowledge was too valuable to lose, too deeply embedded in the rhythms of everyday life. They were present at birth and death, comforted the sick, treated burns and fevers, and knew which herbs could induce sleep or miscarriage. It was a knowledge hard-won and carefully protected. By the time the Middle Ages gave way to the Renaissance, herbal medicine had laid much of the groundwork for modern pharmacology. Though much of it was still entangled in outdated theories, humors, astrology, and sympathetic magic practitioners had cultivated an intimate knowledge of the land, an empirical approach to healing, and a deep understanding of patient care. Some remedies have lasted through centuries. We still use peppermint for nausea, chamomile for calming, willow bark for pain. The shapes of their bottles have changed, their names updated, but the roots of their use trace back to dirt floors, handwritten notes, and the scent of time drying by the hearth. In the end, the story of medieval herbal medicine is not just a tale of plants and potions, but one of persistence, community, and the human desire to care for one another in a fragile world. It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, people turned to the earth and to each other for healing. So as you rest your eyes now, picture that quiet cottage once more. The fire is low, the herbalist hums softly to herself as she labels a jar of dried comfrey. Outside, the fields sleep under starlight. Tomorrow, someone will knock on her door, seeking help, a tincture, or simply reassurance. And she will answer, with a cup of bitter tea and a listening heart. You stand high in the Andean mountains, the air thin and crisp, clouds brushing the jagged peaks that rise all around you. Beneath your feet, the stones form a seamless pathway, weathered by centuries, but still precise, still solid. This is not a forgotten ruin. This is the living legacy of one of the most remarkable engineering civilizations in history, the Inca Empire. An empire without the wheel, without iron tools, without a written language, yet capable of building one of the most advanced networks of roads, terraces, cities, and fortresses ever constructed by hand. It begins with stone. Everywhere in the Andean world, stone was not just material, it was presence, permanence, and power. To the Inca, stone was sacred. It was alive. It had spirit, a force they called kamak. This belief did not lead to worship alone. It led to mastery. The Inca did not just build with stone, they listened to it. They shaped it without forcing it, coaxed it into harmony with the natural contours of the earth in the capital city of Cusco, the very center of their vast domain. Massive stones form the foundations of temples and palaces. Some weigh over 100 tons, and yet they fit together so perfectly that even today, you could not slip a blade of grass between them. There is no mortar-only precision. Each block carved to nestle exactly into its neighbors, their faces smoothed by hours of patient abrasion, not brute chiseling. How did they move them? How did they place them? The answers are quiet, hidden in centuries of experimentation, tradition, and shared knowledge passed not through books, but through hands. The Inca road, system called Capac, owner was another marvel, stretching over 25,000 miles through deserts, valleys, forests, and glaciers. It connected the empire's corners, from present-day Colombia to Chile. It was not a straight path, but an organic network, adapting to the land, not conquering it. Roads were paved with stone, drained by clever channels, and maintained constantly. Rope bridges made from woven grasses spanned deep gorges, replaced every year by local communities who treated the task as both civic duty and sacred ritual. These roads were more than infrastructure. They were arteries of empire. Along them moved armies, goods, messengers, and knowledge. The chasqui, fleet-footed runners, carried information from one station to the next, relaying messages encoded in Kipua's system of knotted cords that recorded numbers, censuses, and possibly stories. Every few miles stood a tambos, a roadside shelter and supply depot, where travelers could rest, resupply, or relay messages onward. The empire's center pulsed with the energy of movement, all made possible by roads, carved by hand through cliffs and canyons. But the greatest harmony between stone and civilization perhaps existed on the mountainsides, where the Inca sculpted the land itself into vast agricultural terraces. These terraces weren't just about food, they were feats of engineering. Carefully laid retaining walls created level fields on impossibly steep slopes. Beneath the surface, layers of gravel, sand, and soil ensured drainage, resisted erosion, and trapped moisture. Crops like maize, potatoes, and quinoa were grown with a precision that allowed harvests at multiple altitudes, feeding millions across a mountainous empire. All this without draft animals to pull plows, without iron to cut stone, without wheels to move supplies. Instead, the Inca used wooden tools, fire, water, and an unmatched understanding of landscape. They used leverage, ramps, human labor, and community. They harnessed gravity, aligning canals and aqueducts to bring glacier melt from mountaintops to thirsty valleys. They thought like rivers, built like roots. Even cities like Machu Picchu were not accidents of grandeur, perched atop ridges, aligned with astronomical events, and constructed with anti-seismic stonework. These cities weren't just practical, they were spiritual, symbolic, each stone set to resist both time and earthquake. Each structure mirrored constellations or honored sacred peaks called apus. There was no separation between architecture and environmentally integration. As night falls over the Andes and the stones cool beneath the mountain wind, you might begin to feel the pulse of this silent engineering. What lessons did the Inca embed in these roads, walls, and terraces? What does it mean to build a civilization that endures not through monuments of ego, but through harmony with the earth? Let these thoughts settle beside you like mist rolling through a stone passageway, quiet, ancient, and full of repose. Morning returns to the highlands with a silvery hush. The sun begins to rise over snow-draped peaks, its golden fingers slipping down through ridge lines, grazing the tops of ancient terraces and warming the stones that still carry the shape of a forgotten empire. These stones do not speak, but they whisper about precision, persistence, and a deep understanding of the land that few other civilizations have ever achieved. As you make your way deeper into the world of Inca engineering, you find that the secret to their success lies not just in craftsmanship, but in community. The Inca Empire was not held together by brute force or extravagant wealth, but by a system of labor, shared responsibility, and common belief. This system was called a kind of civic duty or rotating public service. Every able-bodied citizen owed time to the empire, contributing labor to build roads, fortresses, canals, and storehouses. It was not slavery, nor entirely voluntary, but a deeply embedded part of Inca society, one that enabled massive infrastructure projects without coercion or wage. This collective workforce, organized, skilled, and committed, could assemble massive buildings in isolated mountain passes, connect valleys with stair-stepped paths, and raise walls of megalithic stones that still defy explanation today. The precision with which these projects were carried out speaks not only to tools or techniques, but to a cultural mindset that saw construction as a sacred act, building not only for utility, but for the future. Water management was another area where Inca genius truly shone. In an empire that spanned rainforests, deserts, and alpine tundra, managing water meant life or death. The Inca built canals that flowed with glacial melt, delivering water to dry farmlands and urban fountains alike. At Tipon, near Cusco, an elaborate network of stone-carved channels still flows with water today, demonstrating the Inca mastery over pressure, volume, and gradient. They understood flow, whether of people, goods, or water. The Inca designed their world with movement in mind. Their stepped terraces weren't just for planting. They reduced erosion, stabilized hillsides, and optimized sunlight exposure. Their cities were laid out with astronomical alignments, seasonal wind paths, and rainfall in mind. The placement of windows, doorways, and staircases reflected both form and function, ever purely aesthetic, always intentional. What's striking is how rarely the Inca fought the landscape. Unlike empires that reshaped their terrain to suit cities or fortresses, the Inca adapted to the land's contours, learning from it. They built into it, around it, with it. At Machu Picchu, buildings follow the curve of the ridgeline. Foundations are embedded into bedrock. Stones are shaped to fit existing boulders, rather than the other way around. The mountain was not conquered. It was collaborated with, and then there were the Culcas massive state-run storage facilities built across the empire. Constructed with climate in mind, some were placed in cold, dry altitudes to preserve food. Inside these well-ventilated stone buildings, the Inca stored maize, dried potato sonia, textiles, weapons, and medicinal plants. The empire's ability to prepare for famine or disaster depended on these storehouses, which were managed locally but maintained with imperial oversight. They reflect not just engineering brilliance, but a vision of sustainability and logistical foresight. Even their fortresses were masterclasses in stonework. At Sacsayhuaman, zigzagging walls rise like the spines of a giant serpent, each stone fitted so tightly and irregularly that the pattern appears both chaotic and deliberate, resilient against earthquake and invader alike. The stones are not uniform. Each one is unique, but together they create an unbreakable whole. Much like the empire itself, these works weren't isolated achievements. They were part of an intentional design to knit an empire together, not only with stone and soil, but with shared participation, inherited knowledge, and collective vision. Every terrace, every road, every bridge was part of a larger ecosystem, one that married political stability to environmental stewardship.